My motivation is from the observation that there are different practices of the Common European Asylum Policy, which is also called the CEAS among EU member states. The United Kingdom in particular provides a predominant case that it sometimes aligns itself with the CEAS, but other times it chooses to adopt policies that are different from the CEAS. So, the purpose of this paper is to find out causes influencing the UK's choice to opt in or out of the CEAS. And here are the following questions. And the third one is the most important one I want to ask, which is related to the forces behind the UK's positions. And here's the outline. After the introduction I have just talked about, I'll introduce the development of the CEAS and UK asylum policy, and then the method I'll use, and applying the method I'll discuss the forces behind the UK's positions on the CEAS, and the last part is the discussion and conclusion. So now I'll start with the development of the CEAS. Since 1980s and 90s, European countries were aware of the increasing number of asylum seekers. Therefore, they adopted the Dublin Convention and the resolutions in 1990 and 92. In 1999, the European Council meeting in Tampere, the EU for the first time declared its resolution to create a common European asylum system. And after this, the development of the CEAS can be divided into these three phases. In these phases, several directives and regulations were adopted and continuously revised to set up standards dealing with asylum seekers. And several agencies and institutions were established to support the implementation of these legislation. For example, the EURODAC, which is a system collecting fingerprints from asylum seekers, and this European Asylum Support Office, which is an agency created to promote coordination among the EU and its member states. To be specific, here are the main directives constituting the CEAS, and the directives adopted in 2003, 4, and 5 were revised in 11 and 13 respectively. In brief, the development of the CEAS shows that the CEAS becomes more institutionalized, communitized, and more protective to asylum seekers. And now we move to the UK asylum policies. This table shows the British positions and its national asylum policies corresponding to the CEAS. And as the introduction of the Dublin Convention and the resolutions, at a similar time in 1993, the UK adopted its first national legislation devoted to asylum seekers. It is called the Asylum and Immigration Appeals Act. Here, in the Act, the concepts were consistent with the concepts in the London resolutions. As for the directives, according to EU rules, the UK is allowed to choose whether to opt in or out of EU measures regarding justice and home affairs, which includes the CEAS and these directives. For this means the UK can decide whether to be bound by these directives or not. For the directives adopted in the early phases, the UK chose to opt in. However, for the revised directive, the UK chose to opt out. As for its national asylum policies, although these policies provide certain protections to asylum seekers, however, it is found that these policies, as time goes by, provide more and more limitations to asylum seekers. So, as the CEAS becomes more protective, it is found that the UK tends to keep itself out of the system by its opt-out decisions and also its more restrictive national asylum policies. And this tendency of the UK is the subject the paper is going to explain. According to previous studies, they have explained the UK's opt-out decisions by the public opinion against immigration. However, it is not enough to explain the UK's opt-in decisions. So to understand more comprehensively the UK's choices on the CEAS, I will use the three-step framework of Europeanization, which is introduced by Rushchai Ackrawong in 2001. In the framework, the process of Europeanization is divided into three steps. The first step is to identify the subject at the EU level, which is the CAS in our case. And the second step is to measure the goodness of this, which means to measure the gap between institutions of the EU and the state. And so the gap between the CAS and the British institutions can be measured by the UK's opt-out and restrictive policies. And the third step is to use the 5 factors to explain the process of Europeanization. The first one is multiple little points, which indicates that the more decision makers involved in the process, the harder the consensus can be reached to promote domestic change. And the second one is mediating formal institutions, which implies that the existence of specialized agencies is conducive to the process of Europeanization. And the fourth one, organizational and political cultures. The third one, which is the position the states stand toward Europeanization. And the fourth, differential empowerment of actors. This factor refers that the desire for power is the main motivation of domestic actors to make a change. And the last one is learning, which means the process of policy learning may change preferences or identities of domestic actors, and this leads to domestic change as a result. So now I will use these 5 factors to explain the UK's choice on the CAS. So now let's move to the first one, multiple little points. When it comes to how many decision makers involved in the process of asylum policies, it is actually related to British political system. The operation of the parliamentary system in the UK leads to concentration of decision-making power in the hands of the executive, especially in the hands of the Prime Minister. This trend is found in the period of the Blair administration. As for the period governed by the coalition government from 2010 to 2015, it is found that Cameron faced confrontation from not only his political partner from the Liberal Democrats, but also he faced confrontation from some of the conservative members who were dissatisfied with Cameron's concession in the coalition. So this indicates an increase in veto points in the period of the coalition. However, the effect of veto points should be considered in combination with the cultural factor I'll discuss later. So now we move to the second factor, whether there exists specialized agencies to implement asylum policy in the UK. Here are the several main agencies responsible for this. However, due to the fact that these agencies are merely implementing policies which have already been decided by higher level political leaders, so the effect of this factor is less important in influencing the UK's choice. And now the third one, political cultures. I divide the cultures into 2 positions regarding asylum seekers and EU integration. And I also separate 2 periods governed by different ruling parties, the Labour and the Conservatives, which is regarded as taking advantage in the coalition. As for the position toward asylum seekers, both these 2 parties, alongside with the UK public, regard asylum seekers as threats. And this position against asylum seekers serves as a route for the UK to opt out of the CAS and to adopt restrictive national asylum policy. As for the position toward EU integration, the Labour Party took a more pro-EU approach than the coalition. And this explains the fact that the Labour government opted into the protective directives and adopted restrictive national policies at the same time. And now I will use the same framework to discuss the fourth one, which is related to the desire for power of domestic actors. For the Labour Party, the reason it took a pro-EU approach is not only because of its political culture, but also because of its desire to increase its governmental power. The Labour government increased its decision-making power by claiming that the government should have the right to decide British EU policy, or should have the right to interests in the EU and the government should participate into the directives of the EU. However, at the same time, the public still remain the position against asylum seekers. Therefore, the Labour government adopted more restrictive measures against asylum seekers in order to get the support from the public. As for the coalition government, besides its position against asylum seekers and EU integration, the confrontation Cameron faced, making need to take tougher stances against asylum seekers in order to get support from the dissatisfied conservatives. So now move to the last one, learning. The effect of policy learning depends on the three dimensions listed here. The first one is whether there exists common background in crisis. In the 1980s, the increase in number of asylum seekers is the common background faced by European countries at the time. And the way they dealt with asylum seekers was to view them as threats to national security. This kind of securitization of the issue still remains dominant in the politics and the development of British asylum policies. And the second one is the effect of policy learning depends on the density of interaction between the EU and the states. Although there are interactions between the EU and the UK, it is found that the effect of the interaction depends on the will of political leaders. So it is related to the third one. The effect of policy learning depends on whether the political leader can overcome the pressures from anti-immigration. For the Labour administration, it had the opportunity to opt into protective directives by its promises to its people to defend British interests at the EU level. However, in the coalition government, the confrontation left Cameron with little room to adopt policies that is conducive to policy learning. And now I'll discuss the findings regarding the relations and effect of these factors. It is found that first, factors expected to have positive effect on Europeanization turns out to be negative. For example, few vital points does not necessarily lead to the Europeanization. Instead, it allows political leaders to adopt policies they want. And the securitization of the issue resulting from learning made the UK reluctant to adopt protective measures. And the second one is factors are not equally weighted. For example, these two factors are less important compared to other factors. And the third one is factors are interrelated. For example, the fourth factor serves as the cause of the third factor. And increasing veto points created the necessity for Cameron to adopt tougher stances against asylum seekers. So let me make a brief conclusion. The research in the development of British asylum policies reveals the weak Europeanization of the UK on the issue. And the five factors, especially the cultural one, explain the cause behind this weak Europeanization. The position against asylum seekers in the UK for a long period of time makes the UK an outlier of the process. And the key for the UK to participate in the CAS is the position toward the integration held by the ruling party. So this is my conclusion. Thank you for listening and attention.
Good afternoon, professors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today. My topic is the revival of Scottish nationalism, 1979 to 2014. My name is Rushchai Ackrawong. I'm from Chulalongkorn University. So this is the outline. I will be talking about my research questions and objectives. I will be talking about my hypothesis. I will be briefly explain about nationalism, and I will be talking about the concerning factors, which are political factors, civilian factors, and cultural or so-called social factors. So starting my research questions. The first one is, what are the factors rendering the revival of nationalism in Scotland? especially during the referendum period. And the second research question is, are the factors derived from question number 1 becoming the transitive future of the United Kingdom unity? At this point, many of you may question, what does this have to do with the European Union? The thing is, nationalism can start many things. For example, we see throughout history the breakaway from the governor by the people who are being governed. Nationalism can lead to this separation of a nation or a country. And nationalism is emerging everywhere in Europe right now. The other example would be the area of Catalonia in Spain. And my objective is to analyze the history of Scottish referendum in the past decades, to derive the factors considered to be potential revival of nationalism in Scotland, and to study the repercussions of nationalism on referendum and the Scotland political future as opposed to the United Kingdom. I would like to say that in no point that I'm saying the Scottish should break away from the British, should they break away or they should stay in. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to find out that. Okay? This is for educational only. So start with my hypothesis. The revival of Scottish nationalism in Scotland was a result from many factors, such as political parties and civilian movements, which aroused the patriotic feeling of the Scottish people. The rise of these factors can be considered as a threat to the future of the United Kingdom as a unified nation. Please notice the word I use right here, the word aroused. The word aroused, mostly used with emotional, with feelings, right? And in this topic, I will be talking about where does the feeling of nationalism came from. I will be talking about it now. So, I decided to follow the guideline led by Professor Ernest Gellner, who his work later on adopted by Benedict Anderson, who just passed away recently. May his soul rest in peace. And thank you for everything. Okay. There's a discussion among scholars for a long period of time that what nationalism really is it reason or is it emotion? So let's talk a little bit about psychology. Human beings are emotional. The relationship between emotion and reasons cannot be separated to some extent. People tend to justify their emotion by using reaction, and sometimes it's the other way around. So, according to Ernest Gellner and Benedict Anderson, nationalism basically means the sense of belonging. The sense of belonging in the same community of the people who share mutual ideas, history, and cultures, which result into alienation of the others. In this case, this is what's happening in Scotland. Nationalism has been categorized into 7 main categories according to Ernest Gellner. And for the case of Scotland, it falls into the classical liberal Western nationalism, which is the 4th category. The classical liberal Western nationalism is a situation where two coexisting cultures in the same territory stay together, and the conflict or the disagreement started because when both the governed and governor are educated equally, the governor will feel or will sense or will aware or know that they are being governed by the others. They are not being governed by themselves, which can lead to nationalism, which is the extreme form of patriotism. So let's look at the result of the referendum on September 2014. As we all know, that Scotland decided to stay within the UK. 44.7% said yes, 55.3% said no. The voting total was quite high, 84.6%. It was the highest ever of the referendums conducted concerning the Scottish issue. And if, as we can see, is there are 32 councils in Scotland, and if you look into councils, there are only 4 councils that vote yes. The other 28 said no. But the interesting thing is the 4 are large cities, such as Glasgow and Dundee, which are the top 3 highest populated areas in Scotland. So let me move on to the political factor. The political factor concerns political parties and political issues. The first one I would like to mention is the Scottish National Party, the SNP, the most important party in this case for me, I think personally, because without the SNP, they won't be able to hold a referendum. The Scottish National Party they start from the street politics. They are just movement on the street before they start being a real active political party in the UK. They started since the end of the Second World War. And since then, they won small seat in the parliament. And then eventually, I will explain more why they came into power since 2000. And actually, a little bit background on the referendum. They tried to have it on 2010 when they won the election on 2007. They tried to push the referendum through, but it wasn't successful because it was a coalition government. So the problem was solved in 2011 when they become the majority government and they signed an agreement with David Cameron to have a referendum in 2014. And the second one is the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party never been popular in Scotland because the Scottish people feel that they are not represented by the Conservative Party. And the Conservative Party is the reason why I started with 1979, because it was the year when Mrs. Margaret Thatcher came into office and became the Prime Minister of the UK. Since then, her way of Thatcherism and the Conservative policies upset the Scottish. That's why the Scottish, I would like to explain that the feeling of nationalism in Scotland does not go up in graph like this. If you look into a graph, it goes up and down, depending on the governing government at that time. And it tends to go up with Conservative Party when they are in power. And since the decline of the Liberal Party, the Labour Party become the left-wing politics of the UK political spectrum. And the Labour Party tends to make Scots feel more represented until the time of Prime Minister Tony Blair, which he adopted third way politics and brought into use, which has become the way of the Labour Party, which is upset the Scots. So let's say that the decline of the Labour Party and the feeling of rivalry for the Conservative Party made the SNP strong. So some people might ask, what about economic factor? Why I didn't put it in? Because I have to admit, right here, frankly, economic is not my strong part, but I would like to explain that it plays a part in here as well. I would like to explain about devolved matters and reserved matters. Devolved matters are issues concerning Scotland about powers those were given by the UK Parliament to the Holyrood Parliament to govern themselves. And the reserved matters are matters that are powers those are still in the hand of the United Kingdom. We can see that issues like employment, trade and industry are still in the hand of the UK Parliament, which the Scots really want. If they really want to govern themselves, they must have it all. And the only way to do it is to break away. So move on to civilian factor, or also known as civil factor or social factor. I would like to mention the most important one because of the time limit, I cannot put everything in here. I choose Yes Scotland campaign because it was started in the year 2012, the exact same year that the agreement was signed between Alex Salmond and David Cameron. The Yes Scotland campaign is a civilian campaign that promote awareness on Scottish nationalism and bring it to the people. I put put it right here because interestingly, they have no involvement or they share no connection with political parties at all. Like there is no political power or finance behind them. They work as alliance. The CEO is Mr. Blair Jenkins. Mr. Blair Jenkins he came from a media background. He used to be the anchor for BBC Scotland and the executive producer of BBC Scotland. So his media background made him be more approachable and be able to reach out to people more than political parties. And yes, actually I skipped something. Can I go back? Sorry. Yeah, the SNP. Sorry, I forgot. The SNP before the referendum was signed in 2012, the numbers of the members was roughly a little bit more than 20,000 members. But by 2015, the numbers multiplied 5 times and it become 100,000 members right now. So that means they successfully convinced people to agree with them, to support them. And for the cultural factor, we can see that Scotland have their own unique culture. For example, the Scotch skirt, I forgot what it's called, and the Scottish kit, yeah. And they have their own language, which is the Scottish Gaelic. The reintroduction and insertion of Scottish culture were done. There are many policies designed to insert this value into daily routine of the Scottish people. For example, the Act of 2005, which provide legal obligation to media providers in Scotland to produce and view at least 200 hours of Scottish Gaelic programs on TV. And the requirement of studying Scottish Gaelic to middle school and promotion of Scottish culture in every media possible. And for the modern culture, I would like to feel thankful for the technological advancement because we have to admit that technology become part of our culture and this made everything become more visible. For example, I take a look at the social media sources such as Facebook and Twitter. The SNP got more than 200,000 followers on Facebook. The Yes Scotland campaign 360,000, and Alex Salmond, the First Minister of Scotland, got 100 and almost 70,000. So, our culture made us become more approachable, make the campaigner and people involved become more approachable, and their message can be delivered directly without being feared that they are going to be altered by the media, because the media is now in their hand. And for example, there are some celebrities who also use social media and become idol on this place as well. We have to admit that they are part of our culture. For example, Sir Sean Connery, my favorite James Bond, and Helena Bonham Carter, you all know her. Sir Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones, Vivienne Westwood, the ladies know her, and Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, he made plays, and Sir Patrick Stewart. These celebrities also part of our culture. These are the people who support Scotland independence. Okay, I would like to end my presentation with a quote from Sir Sean Connery. He said that, "Don't worry, we are not moving away. Scotland is still here. We just want to stay on our own." Thank you for your attention.
Hello everyone, my name is Yao Jinxiang, and I come from the mainland China. And now I'm a double degree program between China Speaking University and Waseda University. And this time I will as a representative of the Waseda University to give the speech. And my topic is how international institutions promote domestic reforms of EU member states. It's a kind of research about how the international institutions will influence domestic reforms. I think for Chinese, I think it's a problem that we concentrate on recently. My speech will have 5 parts. The first is introduction and then literature review, and third is theoretical framework and then case study. I will use the journalist to verify my theoretical framework, and then is my conclusion. First is the introduction. So if we talk about international institutions, what is international institution? So from the international relations theory, so we think that the purpose of the international institutions is to promote the stability of international system, because we want peace. We don't want to go back to the World War I and World War II, so we want to have international relations. So I think right now we have to think about this problem in other perspective. That is, what's the relationship between international institutions and domestic politics? So what are the relations between these two parts? So in my opinion, international institution can not only change international relations, but also change the domestic political process and results. So my hypothesis in this essay is, if a country wants to promote its reforms, but there are many domestic obstacles in purely domestic background, so the government or the leaders of the country will making use of international institutions to introduce international institutions in, and then overcome the domestic obstacles, and then to promote the domestic reforms. So it's my basic hypothesis. So why I choose EU as my case study? Because in my opinion, EU is the most institutionalized regional organization. So if I choose EU, I think it's a good choice for case study, because in theoretical, I think it's a good choice. And why I write this kind of paper? Because about 1 year ago, I write the part of the theoretical part to analyze the relation between WTO and China. And right now, I want to use this theoretical framework to analyze the EU and its member states. So the second part is literature review. The first is theory origins. So it is back to the title of my paper. The second image reverse. As we know, the famous theorist Kenneth Ward is his book that there are three images to influence the international relations: the individual, ourselves, and the second image is the state, and the second image is the international system. So the second image reverse means that international system, that international systems can change the behavior of the state. So it is the second image reverse. So recently there is a new subject, and its name is open economic politics. And this subject is meant to study how the international cooperation of international institutions can change the domestic behaviors. So in this area, the leading series is by constructivism. And for example, the Marshall framework, he says that the international institutions can teach us. He will teach us how to behave ourselves. And then is Jeffrey Chapel. He tells us that there is a process of persuasion, that international institutions can persuade us, can help us to believe in something. Although it is not true, but he can make us believe in it. And then is Anita Achaya. He thinks that localization. He thinks that actually we have an international identity, but for a country, you can localize this kind of international identity, such as Japan, China, and South Korea. Also, we believe in one international identity, but for ourselves, we will localize this kind of international identity. So the other literary review is by neoliberal institutionalism, such as Robert Putnam, the two-level game, and Christina Davis, issue linkage. It means that, such as Japan, we don't want to talk about the agricultural problems, but if you want to join TPP, you have to put the agricultural problems in the negotiation process. It's a kind of issue linkage. And the next is James Raymond. conditionality. It means if you want to join the international institutions, you have to obey so many conditions by these international institutions. It's a kind of benefits and cost. And then is Xingyuan and Simon's, the social mobilization. It means that international institutions can mobilize the potential beneficiaries because their voices can't be heard in daily lives. But by this kind of thing, their voice can be heard by the leaders of the country. And I think by this short little review, there are three shortcomings of the current status. The first is they don't pay so much attention to domestic political motives. Because why a state want to join this kind of international institutions? And second is that they don't pay much attention to domestic political institutions. Because if the international institution want to affect a state, it has to go through the specific domestic institutions. So I think this time, this is very important. And then is how to combine constructivism and neoliberal institutionalism together. Because for so many scholars, if they stick to something, they will believe in that. They will not listen to the voice of others. So I think we should try to combine this together. And the third part is the theoretical framework. In this chart, you know that the stalled domestic reforms, it means we have some problems in our domestic reforms. It can't be put forward. But in that time, as the leader of the government, we have to take active introduction of international institutions. But how this institution can change domestic behavior? There are three mechanisms. The first is a kind of redistribution of power. It can change the power struggles of a country. And then is a tour of civil and commitment, because the state can make more convinced commitments to the other actors of the country. And then is a tour of political mobilization, because these kind of international institutions can help to mobilize these countries' different actors. And then by these kind of mechanisms, it can help to overcome this kind of domestic obstacles, such as the veto obstacle, the commitment obstacle, and the mobilized obstacle. I will say it in detail. First, in our domestic reforms, I think there are three obstacles. The first is the veto obstacle. I think the veto player theory is a good theory, because we will not talk about whether we are democracy countries, because it will only count the veto players in the country. So I think for powerless democracies, the veto players in this kind of countries are mainly Congress parties or this kind of things, and in some centralized regimes, such as some African countries or some like China. China is a kind of centralized country. So the army, the landlord, the capital group, or some other informal powers in this country can have great power. And third is the past dependence. Because for a country, if you stick to one institution, it's hard for you to change. And the second obstacle is a commitment obstacle, because of the time inconsistency. Because when you want to do reforms, you will talk to somebody that if we do these reforms, we can have benefits in a long period. But people don't believe in that. They only want short benefits. So there's a kind of paradox in this. And then the sudden stop or reverse. Because for a centralized country, today he said, I will perform this reform. But after 1 month or after 1 day, he said, I don't want this reform. Because it's very hard to convince the other people in this country. And lastly, the mobilization of the stakeholders is because of collective action dilemma. So how can international institutions help to overcome these obstacles? First is the tour of redistribution of power. It can help to overcome the legal obstacles. Because if you want to join the negotiations with the EU, such as kind of international institutions, you can have a gender-setting rights. You can negotiate directly with the people in EU. So you don't need to care about the other people in your country. And next is the tour of signal and commitment. Because if you join an international institution, you have to obey the laws in this institution. So the leader of this government will tie your hands. Actually, your power becomes smaller, but its power to put forward the reforms will be stronger. And the last is the tour of political mobilization. Because by joining international institutions, it can shape a certain identity, and this identity is a basic for mobilization. So that is a case study of German environmental reforms. So I think for German, the domestics, such as the fatal obstacles, because in 1990, the German has some policies on carbon taxes, renewable energies. But in that time, the German has experienced a serious stagnation of employment. So this kind of policies have come to failure. And then is a commitment obstacles. So because this, he want to have this policy, but this policy has come to failure. So it's very difficult to convince others that we want to do some reforms. And then is mobilization obstacles. As we know, the environmental awareness at that time is not so strong. And then how to overcome these obstacles by international institutions. And first is the tour of redistribution of power. The most important is the development of the Green Party. And the second is the tour of signal and commitment. So by the EU environmental legal system, they will have great power to put forward their policies. And the last is a tour of political mobilization, because by joining EU, it can mobilize the potential beneficiaries in Germany these people want to have this kind of reforms, time limited, and then the conclusion. So we have come back to the hypothesis that the state want to cooperate with international institutions to put forward reforms, and then we should think about China's one belt, one road, and China's IIB. So I think we can have a better understanding of this kind of initiative. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Satoru Namba. I'm from Japan, Tsai University. I'm a doctoral student in graduate school of social sciences. My presentation title is Border-Related Deaths in the European Borderland. And I'd like to show you a table to start my presentation. This table by International Organization for Migration show that in 2015, more than 4,900 people died in the borderland or worldwide, and this is Asian regions number. More than 700 people died in Asian borderland. So, curiously, border-related deaths happen because the national border existing. But border-related death is a global issue. In other words, borderless issue. And European borderland is more large-scale number happened in Europe. Then I announced about those deaths and relationship between the policy of European Union. There are my today's context. To start in introduction, I set my question in today's presentation. Then I announced Europeanization and European policy in immigration policy. Then I announced about border-related tests and European policies. In introduction, after our screen, large-scale migration to Europe happened, but those migration understood as economic immigration. But September 2015, European country was shocked by cruelty picture. Very little children died in the EUSI. This is a tragedy. But those tragedies happened in European borderland. At least 20,000 people have died in European borderland since 1988. But the cruelty picture, after cruelty picture, European country and European Union understood migration as refugee and refugee crisis. Then this table shows us the number of arrivals and deaths in borderland. Of course, in Central Mediterranean route is more large-scale migration happening. In other words, a lot of people coming Greece, but more dangerous is Central Mediterranean route. At least 2,800 people died just one day, 1 year. And in this route, this table shows arrivals by sea to Italy. Those numbers show us the arrival in Italy is majority of arrival in Italy isn't Syrian people. In other words, a lot of various people have various origin coming in Italy. Generally speaking, refugee crisis understood as problem related with Syrian civil war. But in Central Mediterranean, a lot of sub-Saharan people arrived to Europe, and more large number of refugees dying in the Central Mediterranean route. In other words, this was very dangerous for migrants, but they take those routes. Why refugees take a dangerous route, and why they die in the sea? This presentation examines the relationship between the immigration policies and including border deaths in European borderland. Then I shift to discussion about European policy. Today, Europe has a unique polity. Of course, this is European Union. And European Union and European states work together as a normative power. And some scholars say those institutions understood as Europe with grand U. Generally speaking, migration policies understood as a very complicated policy because those policy areas related with state sovereign. But in Europe, after Schengen acquis ensured free movement for persons, including third country nations. After Amsterdam Treaty, migration policy became EU policy area. This line shows Schengen land, and those colorful points shows the number of foreigner camp. Then this study shows including the foreign camp after the 2001. In other words, And in 1990s, immigration became a security problem. For example, from national or the discrimination of asylum and so on. Those securitization means that immigrants and asylum seekers become object of security. Then Europeanization tightened the immigration control policies. Then I shift to the discussion about border-relatedness. As I say, border-relatedness is a global issue, but the number of border-relatedness in the world calculated by NGO, because calculating the number of deaths means responsibility for safe for them. And according to Porter's Europe, in Europe, 21,439 people died since 1988 to 2014. In other words, in European border, on average, more than 1,000 people die each year. In political sciences or peace studies, more than 1,000 victims per year is a definition of war. So some scholars say that phenomenon is war on illegal immigration. This figure show, Europe is calculated by United for Intercultural Action, and blue is calculated by Porter's Europe. Both institutions are non-governmental organization. And this table shows us that after 1995, in other words, after the abolition of internal border control, the number of border deaths is increasing trends. And this map shows where people die. The scale of SAC will mean the number of deaths. This map shows us to Central Mediterranean is very dangerous route. And the Central Mediterranean route is characterized by masculinization. In general speaking, feminization of international migration happened because in developed countries there are the demand for the household worker or care worker, etc. But in Central Mediterranean route, most of all migrants are young men. It means this route is too difficult to use for women, elderly people, handicapped people. But so majority of bodies in sea is men. But those routes has a gender risk. In other words, women are more precarious situation because there are also sexuality happening in those borders. Then this is a number of asylum application in Italy. It is blue in the young man. Then back to this map too. The color of the circle means why they die. Blue means number of drowned people. Then most of all border-related deaths in Europe happen in sea and people drowned. And those phenomena isn't natural. It directly relates with European policy. I want to cite this article of derivative. This article say in order to illegal immigration effectively, it is essential that all member states introduce provision laying down the obligation of carries transport holding nationals into the territorial member states. By this attribute, EU and member states ban private company to carry illegal immigrants. And in reality, the right of asylum is very don't respect. Then, in consequence of EU and member states immigration control policy, irregular immigrants is more dangerous. Of course, EU or member states didn't kill them, but of course they are innocent. But some cases, EU or member states may die illegal migrants. I want to cite a case in 2007. Two Italian fishermen had drowned illegal migrants in sea around Lampedusa island, south of Italy. This act is respect of international law, but Italy arrested fishermen because, according to Italian police, they are smugglers. In other words, Italian police demand their nation to let to die if the people maybe have no paper. They are very terrible. But in academic term, I will cite Michel Foucault, laissez mourir signifie laissez mourir. Those biopolitics happen in South borderland, European borderland. Then my conclusion is to combat illegal immigrants, EU and member states strict immigration control policy. Then illegal immigrants would become more risky by Europe. And European border policy was structural violence for illegal immigrants, including asylum seekers, necropolitics. In other words, necropolitics works for refugees in European borderlands. Thank you for listening.